everyone. So, welcome to the Queerness Diaries. Today, I'm joined again by Joseph Anthony Rulli. How are you today, Joe?
I'm well, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, so thanks so much again for joining me today on the pod. And so today as I said on my previous pod, we're going to be talking about different things within the community regarding mental health topics. And today we're talking specifically about feelings of navigating loneliness in the community, which can be a hot topic, but it's something that I found a lot of people don't want to discuss. But the more we discuss it, I think with our shared experience, the more people can relate because there's so many of us out there that go through those periods where we feel isolated, alone, rejected, and in sharing our feelings and our stories, I think it helps. Even if it helps one person out there, I think it's super important. So thanks very much for joining me again today, Joe.
Yeah, thanks for hosting. Yeah.
So what I thought we'd do today is kind of go through our shared experiences. And I always, like I said before, I always feel like everything that we've been through plays a part right from, those monumental years through childhood and adolescence to how we feel now. And so in terms of, I wanted to start off with sort of your experience growing up and in terms of high school and going through that period. So for me, when I grew up, I primary school, which was like up until 10, 11 years old, I was always reasonably okay, but I was known as a very shy kid and took to hypnotherapy and all these things because I was so shy. But once I hit 10, 11, it's like I completely became isolated for 6 years in the secondary school. And I'm not sure how your experience was, but looking back, it's really shaped how I am today in so many ways and played into my social interactions and my social awkwardness as well at times. And I was wondering how the experience was for you in terms of growing up and navigating school and friendships, and when that sort of first feeling of, being a little bit more on the outs sort of came for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Excuse me. For me, I came from a very strong family. My
Yeah.
mom and dad, two sisters. Uh, and I always tell people I was the middle child.
Yeah.
However, I was the only boy in an Italian family. So
Yeah.
it was like being royalty.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, grandparents, cousins, cousins of my mom and dad, just the extended family was
Yeah.
huge. And we'd do, whether it was a wedding or a funeral or a graduation party, there was always
Yeah.
tons of people around. So in that way, I felt part of something, is
Yeah.
really a very tight-knit clan, I guess.
Yeah.
I remember going around, my dad and I, excuse me, my dad and I would go around table to table at like wedding receptions or graduation parties, and we just chat and chat with people. And that's what I still have that. And
Yeah.
I admired that in him, and I have always loved doing that. My mom and my sisters were a little more reserved. My mom especially, she really just kind of loved to just sit at a table and talk with people who were around.
Yeah.
She
Yeah.
didn't do much moving around, and so that it was just very different. In school, I attached myself. Um, and I think that's where sort of the seeds are planted for trying to live a life that's not lonely, even when I'm not
Yeah.
alone.
Yeah.
Um, that I, really latched myself onto some of the especially the guys in my class. We were
Yeah.
together for, 8 years from in the
Yeah.
United States. It's primary school and middle school. So it's from, 6 years old till like 13 or 14.
Yeah.
You're with pretty much the same kids. And I was never good at any sports, but I always played sports.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sort of, I was picked never last, but almost last,
Yeah.
in on pickup games of stuff. But I always had real tight friendships. In fact, three of the guys we still get together every once in a while
Oh,
from
that's super cool.
1971 on.
Yeah.
We have known each other.
It's nice to
So,
have a reunion like that with people from
yeah,
school
yeah.
and keep those friendships.
As I got older and into high school, I think I addressed some of this in the other episode, but I really learned how to uh, sort of get people to laugh, get
Yeah.
engaged with people. And that developed, I think, on the dark side, that developed into I have to do this,
Yeah.
or otherwise people won't pay attention to me.
Yeah.
And I think just unintentionally, that helped me be a really good teacher and preacher
Yeah.
because one of my biggest fears has always been being discounted,
Yeah.
not being listened to. Uh, uh, yeah, it was, and I think that helped me develop a style in the classroom or in church, from the pulpit
Yeah.
of engaging people. And for some viewers who might not have seen my episode, I was a Catholic priest for 14 years.
Yeah.
So so I think that fear, uh, on the upside of it, it really pushed me to do better in
Yeah.
just practical kind of engaging with people. Otherwise, I think when I think I remember late college, all my roommates were going off here and there doing job interviews. And I was set by the time I was in my last year in university,
Yeah.
um, I had already known I was going into the seminary.
Yeah.
So I didn't have any interviews to do. I just, so there'd be weekends where they'd be off, to out of town places doing job interviews or graduate school interviews, and
Yeah.
I'd be in the dorm. So, I remember having that first inkling of being alone. And then it only was maybe later on in the semester, towards the end of, before graduation,
Yeah.
that I really started feeling this uneasiness about it. Because
Yeah.
as a kid, I loved being alone. I loved just kind of sitting and either nerd me, reading encyclopedia articles about historical events.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
you know, um, it developed later on into this darker kind of I'm alone because there's nobody else here.
Yeah. I understand.
And then that translates to I'm alone in the world because there is no one else inside.
Yeah.
And when I went into seminary, I met a couple guys that I fell head over heels with. Never acted on it in the early days, and then they were gone,
Yeah.
over the summer or whatever. And it was just I remember my first year doing an internship at a Catholic parish in Fort Wayne, Indiana, which is about maybe 100 kilometers or so from South Bend, where I grew up. I knew no
Yeah.
one in Fort Wayne. And
Yeah.
at the time, it was the city and surrounding areas, about 250,000 people. And
Yeah.
that's one of the things in my early journal I commented is that I am in the middle of 250,000 people and I have no one.
Yeah.
And it was this stark reality. And one of the guys I fell for in seminary, he was in Illinois, and he was one of my main like focuses to write letters to. I developed letter writing
Yeah.
that summer, and this would have been the summer of 88.
Yeah.
And I remember, my God, probably 60, 70 letters to different people,
Yeah.
um, and not getting a response. That's, when you
Oh,
said that
yeah.
with
Yeah.
your episode, it was like, it always seems like I'm the one doing this. I'm the one organizing this or that get together.
Yeah. It's a
That was
horrible
me.
feeling. Yeah.
That was me. Because the underlying fear is if I don't do it, I'm going to be alone. If I don't organize this, I will have nothing to do.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm happy to say, now my life is so different. I am not always the one to
Yeah.
introduce an idea to do something, or I have some great friends, um, and one of whom he and I do a lot together, and it's just been a real gift that um, it's not dependent on me all the time.
Yeah.
There's a couple, he and his roommate are just amazing, with just inclusion and, um, just hanging out.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. That's good.
yeah, so I think my awareness, and I started writing in my journal back then, way back then.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, in my fear and anger of rejection, I destroyed my first two journals. And
Yeah.
when I was a priest, it just scared the hell out of me, and I was still kind of hurt and angry at relationships that didn't play out.
Yeah.
And just I remember I had a fireplace in one of my places that I lived, and I burned them. And it's just
Yeah.
I regret it, but I don't pound myself into the ground because of it. It was, I don't know, maybe I needed to do that, but I do regret the loss of reflecting on that.
Yeah.
I mean, now I just have my memories, but I have my other journals, so it is very helpful. But um,
Yeah.
yeah, those early ones were really, really very raw and visceral, and but like I said, it is what it is, and I've stopped beating myself up a long time ago about stuff like that.
Yeah, it's the best way to be, I think. Is, but in the,
My grandfather was a boxer. I'm not. So,
yeah. But no, I think it happens to a lot of us, when especially when like when we're creating like a journal, like and things about our life that we really don't want to get out there especially at that age. It's like for me, I used to, well, they're still in there in the cupboards, but I would bury them on top of like coursework from college and bury them and then maybe write a subject over them. But I knew it was like some of the journals and things I'd been collecting because I always used to like to write out my feelings because I used to bottle everything inside verbally. And I was very much I enjoyed being a loner as a child. I still do now in many ways, but it switched a lot after school when I turned 16. And I think that was because so we call it secondary school, from 11 to 16 in the UK,
yeah,
I had a different experience from the first 10 years of my life where in that first school, the primary school in the UK, I was always surrounded by that same group of people. I'd known them since I was 2, 3 years old. And so even though I was the quiet kid and doing strange stuff by 8, 9 years old, like I've said before in my podcast, going off and doing urban exploration, exploring abandoned buildings, whilst most kids were just, I don't know, playing with the Barbies or on PlayStation, I wanted the adrenaline of that. And so if my friends' parents found out I was doing that, they'd be like, oh, hell no, start hanging around with Connor. So I did it on my own a lot of the time. And the town, which I grew up in, used to have a lot of those buildings and history around it to do it. Most of it's gone now. But when I moved, into my first half of my teens, I remember my lunch breaks in school. Everyone sort of thought I had a really serious problem because I just didn't talk. I always remember my presentation I had to do when I was 14 for English class. I had so much anxiety. I still remember it to this day. I think I got my mom to make me phone in sick once, but I still had to do it in front of the class like this,
at
shaking.
some point, yeah.
And I feel like in that presentation, like honestly, most of the people in that class had never heard me speak. I was that quiet on lunch breaks. I would go off on my own and I'd hate it. So I'd go in the library and hide. And yeah, I didn't really have any friends in school. And it went the complete diametrical opposite when I went to college, because that was the time where, even though it was a struggle at home with coming out, like I've discussed before, I wanted that crowd around me. I wanted the validation, the acceptance, and to feel liked or like I sort of fit in, even though I always felt like I didn't. And so I'd try and play different, not characters, but, versions of myself in a way that I wanted to be, yeah, more liked or funnier and catch on to what other people were doing and whatever was the trend. And
Right.
it never seemed to work. I always felt like I was socially awkward. So I'd get 16, 17, eventually more into a group of people. But I was the guy through doing that used to make, like, we'd go on camping trips, get wasted at 17. There'd be a group of like 20 of us
Yeah.
from college. But outside of that, I am like, I mean, I don't speak to any of them now. They weren't real friendships. It was just me trying to organize something to try and feel some sort of validation because I felt very isolated in the years prior. And I realized that has come throughout my life, like in the gay community, and it's reared its head several times since. That ability to want to be liked and want to sort of fit in, but always, like I said before, that expression, the turnip in the fruit basket. Like I always use that because the reality is, and this is what I realized, people actually enjoy me when I'm just being my authentic self. But for the longest time, I felt like I had to be a certain way, funnier or wittier, whatever it was, to be a part of these groups. And because I'd had no social skills before, and I didn't really know much about, ADHD and everything back then, I didn't have the social like clues or awareness. And so, yeah, it was, I mean, when I think back to my teens, it was up and down, a real roller coaster ride.
Yeah. Well, that's funny. You said something that tripped when I first moved to Chicago, after again, just to review for some viewers who might not know, I was in a mental institution for 6 months and then told, the priesthood was not an
Yeah,
option anymore, through no action on my part or no accusation either. So, but I moved to Chicago and, a very lively gay community here.
yeah,
Um, uh, I remember walking up and down the main street of what has been called Boys Town, but has since more
yeah,
sensitively been changed to North
yeah,
Halsted after the street that it's on. But it was seen, especially the sort of the iconoclasm of 2020 with all the statue busting that went around here.
yeah,
That became part of it. That it was a voluntary name change because Boys Town elicited a very monochrome view of being gay. It was young, male, white,
yeah,
and fit. So all the racist, misogynist, body shaming, everything about it. And it was really kind of a nice change. But before that, it was very focused.
yeah,
You walk down these sex stores or clothing stores, and they were all, models, the
yeah,
mannequins were very obviously white, fit, male.
yeah,
And I remember just reflecting, walking up and down at night and not having anything to do. Um,
yeah,
and realizing that, okay, I have been told by the church, I'm not coming back.
yeah,
So
yeah,
that was a rejection, even though I know, I wasn't being rejected uh, uh, in my being, even though it was sort of like, oh yeah, you're
yeah,
gay. No, you can't do this anymore. So in a sense, I say that, but that that it wasn't a rejection of my being. But then in another sense, yeah, it was.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so I felt that, okay, that's not an option for me in that community. And then I go up and down North Halsted, and it's like, I'm not part of this community either. I feel
yeah,
so out of place. It was so highly sexualized, and it still is,
yeah,
in a lot of ways. It's still very highly corporeal, very focused on body.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but what I found oddly in the gay community, online dating, with all its traps and annoyances and emptiness, it has given me uh, a few really nice connections with guys.
yeah,
Uh, that goes beyond kind of the physical. Especially with, when you have this ability to give your preferences. I go for younger guys. So I go for younger guys who are into older guys.
yeah,
And it's sort of like it takes that whole mystery away
yeah,
when
yeah,
that's up front.
yeah,
And
it's
it's like, yeah,
true.
come on over. We'll have a drink. Whether it ends up anything else,
Yeah,
nothing planned.
yeah,
Um, So I still connect with guys from like 10 years ago who
Yeah.
I met, you know, on different sites. And this is so much easier than bar hopping. Um,
Yeah.
when, nobody has written on their clothing, what their preferences are.
Yeah.
So it makes it very difficult. So that's been an odd, for me, it's been an odd positive in
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
gay
I know what you
community. It's
mean.
like, huh, because online dating gets kind of a bad rap as far as empty and shallow hookup kind of thing. And it's like, well, yeah, that's part of it, but there is a there is a nicer side that I've really benefited from.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think for me as well, when I moved to Madrid, I mean, they banned it now, but they used to have the fake GPS on Grinder and things.
Oh yeah, we
And
talked. Yes.
that was the worst thing when they got rid of that. I know there's some paywall and you can still sort of do it now, but it really helped me because before I was moving from England, I got to move around the city and talk to people. And so when I moved there, it made it a lot easier to have a group of people that I knew. And, some of them were horrendous, some of them were great, some of them I still speak to now.
Yeah.
And so it was great in that sense because I felt like, you know, in and I'd used it before that, like in the UK as well. If I was going to Manchester or London because like I said, I only had glimpses into sort of the community and going out. And I was never the person that could go out on my own either. I had too much social anxiety to do that. So I always wanted to have someone that I could meet or go out with. And so it helped a lot when I moved to Madrid. But again, I started to feel like I wanted this group of friends around me as time went on, and it didn't necessarily, it wasn't always about the connection. It was more about, I was 25 at the time, and I've never been properly, living my gay life or whatever. So I just don't want the risk of being alone. And for some reason, I thought having a quantity of people, like, okay, I've always got this group of like five, six, seven people to go out with. It became like this flipping, I don't know, like this boy band. We went and did everything together. And in the end, I think we had a lot of resentment for each other by COVID because it was just like we did everything together and had it was like there was always one boss of the group that was like, we need to do this and we need to do that. But there's a lot of groups like that especially in Madrid, that sort of do everything together. And it was so different from the loner aspect I'd had in my life before. And also, it became very much about the partying, and we were pretty much a group of friends that were always drinking, wasted, going to every bar, every club, out 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5 nights a week sometimes. And then at the same time, there was an emotional disconnect with a lot of them because they would maybe want to do like a hike, but I'd be like, I love to hike, but on my own with my headphones in. So no, I'll see you at the club at the weekend.
Yeah.
And so I think I shot myself in the foot with building emotional connections with a lot of them in
Yeah.
that sense too. But it's like I just could not in Madrid be on my own. I had to be around someone or this group at all times and always have a plan. And I think it's because I've been through that period from 18 to 25 of feeling like a loner from the gay community, and like 11 until 15 in school. And then I'd had that 2 year sort of thing in college where I got to know all these people. And then I felt like, okay, after college, that completely disappeared and dissipated. So I felt like for some reason I had to work really hard on having these friendships, but I was putting so much in, not realizing a lot of the relationships were maybe quite superficial. And it wasn't until I started to go through more difficult times and COVID was hitting that I realized, oh crap, like most of these people don't give a crap about me really. They're just, someone to party with. And I'm
Hmm.
like, I
Hmm.
created this mess kind of. And so unpacking that was a lot. And I
Yeah.
think I've
Yeah.
still been unpacking it over the last few years. I'm like, it
Yeah.
could have gone
Yeah.
very differently in Madrid. And I did make a lot of friends that I still speak to now, but also I met a lot of people, bad people too, that just not to be on my own. And so there's a lot of, I try not to regret it too much now, but at the time I had a lot of regrets for not using the time differently.
Right, right. And I think, yeah, I think after a period of time, that's like with me with the journals. It's like, yeah, I've
Yeah.
learned to, okay, this is what it was, and
Yeah.
I can grow from, well, because I've survived it. So, it's like,
Yeah.
okay, there's something there. But I think too, as I can only speak for myself, as the years pass by very
Yeah.
quickly, um, that fear of not just loneliness, but that fear of being alone
Yeah.
is really heavy sometimes, heavier sometimes than others, but it does weigh on me.
Yeah.
But I think for me, I found, the few really, really, really strong friendships that I have now that still exist, are really, I don't take them for granted. I really treasure them.
Yeah.
And I think that's for me, that will be a huge part of the solution to the
Yeah.
fear, is that, okay, I might not have one person in my life, for the rest of my life,
Yeah.
but I do have this cult. I don't know if I could, I've never been good at solo relationships, at exclusive relationships.
Yeah.
Um, so maybe that's just, that might be just an unrealistic expectation on myself.
Yeah. No,
Is
I
that
can
just
relate to that a lot actually, because I remember when I was in my first relationship, or I was 26, and he did not like my friends, get along with them. And I really isolated myself. And in that relationship, I felt, even though I was in a relationship and he did a lot of great things and tried to make me feel the best that I could and was very immersive in bringing his family and his friends around me. I felt more alone in that relationship and like I missed the parties and the attention and the group of friends, but I couldn't have them around. Like I had to sneak a text to them, but my WhatsApp notifications, for example, would be off. It was that ridiculous when I look
yeah,
back. Like, I'm like, why did I live that way, trying to juggle two lives? I'm the only person that made myself miserable in the end in doing that. But yeah, I definitely remember towards the end of the relationship, I had such resentment for my partner at the time because I felt like he'd stolen my life away from me. But my
mhm,
life was quite a shallow, superficial life of just going to these parties. And yeah, we did have great times, like all the picnics and, the karaoke nights and really good, great times together. But we didn't really travel together or do things beyond the gay community, if you know what I mean. Everything in that friendship group was about what are we wearing for this party? Which party are we going to next weekend? Like
yeah,
talking about all the guys we knew and each other's messy dating lives. And there was nothing substantial, but I started to, when I came out of that relationship, because I'd had so much time to think on my own, I think I then was very emotionally vulnerable, and I started to be emotionally vulnerable with these people and bring them back into my life after my relationship. But it was for them a very superficial relationship, and I kind of ditched them for my partner because I didn't like them. And so it was hard to get back. But suddenly I was sending, 5, 6 minute voice clips, which I still do now to people, just about the day and whatever. And sometimes they'd not reply for 3 or 4 days, and I'd be like miserable, like that bitch is not replying.
yeah, yeah,
And so I think a lot of it, like with loneliness and self-acceptance, has had to do with myself. I could, similar to what you said, about being in a city with so many people in Madrid and in Barcelona, like millions of people, but I always felt like I was on my own. And
Mhm.
if I just fled the city, no one would notice or check in. And yeah, I think from COVID onwards, that started to affect me a lot. And it's still something I'm working on now. Like, just because there's things I have comfortability in with being on my own, like with my hobbies, but really for a good foundation of a friendship or relationship, I've realized I have to allow people into those aspects of my life, like my hobbies and things, and not just emotionally trauma dump or whatever I do,
Right, right, right.
overshare. So it's a hard balancing act, I think.
Hmm.
And I'm not sure what your experience was when you sort of first started going out into the gay community. Like I always say, everyone remembers their first night out at a gay club, their
Yeah.
first sort of relationship and feelings around that. Like, was it
That's
awkward for you that very first time, like you went into a
Well,
gay
it's funny. There are two
club?
different levels to that
Yeah,
because
yeah,
there's my sort of coming out in the seminary,
yeah,
and there was a pub on the grounds um, of the seminary, and there. I look back now, and I hung out with a group of gay guys without ever
yeah,
talking about it, and then when I started with my relationship with the one guy, it was still closeted. I mean, we still
yeah,
couldn't, there were no public displays of affection, nothing like
yeah,
that. So that was a strange experience in a
yeah. I can
sort of gay club. But then when I came to Chicago, um, I had met a few guys who were involved in a group called Courage.
Yeah,
And it's a support group for Catholic gay people.
yeah,
And it was really, I mean, I think I needed that at the time. It was really very supportive. It just became, for me, it just became a little too 12 step-ish
yeah,
negative.
yeah,
Like, oh my God, I don't need this added burden of shame again.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
and again, it wasn't, that's how I was interpreting it. And so I kind of distanced myself. And then as I developed a few more friendships, I would go out, and a lot of my friendships were with heterosexual guys
yeah,
and women. So we just go to any bar, and it wasn't, I don't like a lot of noise. I
yeah,
like going, I try to find bars that have no televisions in them,
yeah, yeah.
which
I
they
know what
do
you.
exist. They do
Yeah,
exist. And so I'd rather sit and talk, with a few people or even one
yeah,
guy. So I do like meeting up with guys at bars
yeah,
that are really kind of very, I guess, exclusive in a way, that they're not sports bars, they're not loud music, they don't have
yeah,
live
yeah, for
music,
sure.
those kind of exclusives. Or like we have some really great small cafes in the
Yeah,
city, and bookshops with cafes in them,
yeah,
so that's much more my speed, which I attribute that to my personality, because even though I am, now I've been in Chicago 18 years, so I've
yeah,
slowed down a bit, but I've always been, as far as like going out in public, I've always, even in college, always favored a quieter
yeah,
kind of ambiance than
yeah.
not. So, but that's more personality, I think.
Yeah, I think for me, like, especially because I've had so much experience living now in Spain, like, in fact, it's been 8 years tomorrow since I moved. So, my
Wow.
8 year anniversary of Spain
Yeah,
coming
happy
up.
anniversary.
Yeah, and it's like, it's gone so fast. But with my, like, heterosexual girlfriends over there that I had, I would do the other stuff. Like, we would go to the park, have a picnic, and it was a completely different friendship. But for some reason, I had these sort of friendships from feeling like I'd missed out with my gay friends that we all had to do, even if it was a picnic. It was like, let's invite a group of gay people from the city, some random people off Grindr we've never met,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
turn it into some sort of I mean, we got in trouble many times at the park because we'd invite like 15 people and have like all these blankets and blast the music and terrible 25-year-olds just causing chaos in a peaceful park. But
I've run into you guys at the beach sometimes.
and I mean, nowadays I'm so much different because I'm very much a one-to-one person, and I'm the same. Like, if I meet someone, I don't want to be part of like a clique or a group because
Right.
it went very badly for me during COVID when had a very bad experience with a guy that came into the friendship group in my life that sort of I feel like groomed me, and I can't talk too much about it because it's still like a case ongoing in Spain. But this person
Oh,
terrorized my life for 4 years, like hacking
wow.
into my system, turned all my friends against me, and tried to do something very nasty to me and invaded everything from my employment. So once that group was gone and they all sided with him, I was like, well, I really need to reevaluate who's coming in and out of my life, my friendships. And then like the true loneliness like hit me for the first time because it was like, oh crap, I've got no one in the city. It's
Yeah.
COVID. And everyone's got this idea of me that's not true, that's being portrayed by this ringleader of this group now, that guy, and it made it very difficult to trust new people. And I went through a problem of being very angry, and the anger would come out when I would drink, and if
Mhm.
I'd get rejected, meeting someone new. And it happens to all of us, you know. Sometimes we meet people, don't connect or whatever. But if it happened to me, I'd take it like a dagger. I don't know if it's like
Right,
part of
right,
my
right.
ADHD, and just feel really miserable and on my own. And I
Yeah.
couldn't fake it anymore. I was always good at being, you know, for those initial 5 years or so in Madrid, at putting on the happy face and getting the group to do events and that. And by the end year or two in Madrid, I was extremely isolated and miserable. And it felt like whoever I met, the friendship would implode because I was so we're still dealing with the effects of this. I can only call this person a stalker. And that was one of the reasons I left. So going into Barcelona and feeling like I could start anew, what I realized is I hadn't dealt with that trauma. And so I was still finding myself, like with the video I posted a few months ago, feeling lonely and disposable because I felt like if my best friends, but they weren't best friends, a lot of
Right,
them, because
right.
that was a superficial relationship, could dispose of me so easily. Why am I putting in 100% to people I
Mhm.
barely know? And then as soon as it's, you know, their turn or whatever to make the effort, they just disappear. And I always felt like ghosted and rejected. And so it's still something I'm working on this day, like finding a peace within myself and feeling comfortable within myself, because I found with the gay community the most loneliness and unfortunately bullying as well.
Oh, yeah,
And that really came from that situation 4 years ago.
yeah,
And so
yeah.
I think I'm still processing that to build better relationships in the future, because I've realized now you only need a few solid, good friends that
Right.
are going to be there. Um, but I think a lot of us go through that period where we've been rejected at a younger age and we want that acceptance of
Hmm.
sort of whatever it is, going through everything very fast, and it can be quite tumultuous. And yeah, what I've sort of learned now is it's got to be quality over quantity when it comes to friendships, and really taking the time to get to know someone, and not sort of forcing it as well with people. But for the longest time, it was whoever was the yes man or someone I could have around me would be who I'd have around. And now it's like, okay, I'm still learning to be good on my own, but when it comes to new friendships, I don't have to dump my whole life story the first time I meet them, you know, and
Right, right,
I
right.
can build like organic connections that way, but it's still a work in progress.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. And it still continues to be a work in progress for me. So yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it's one of those things, but I'm not sure for you in terms of like relationships and partners, how you found it, like the almost like the double life of having like you could be yourselves at home, but was it sort of lonely in the fact that out in public you had to shield so much of it, especially
Oh yeah, yeah, especially yeah, like the seminary days. We hardly ever went out in public. I mean, we
yeah,
went to that pub that was on the ground,
yeah,
um, and we just went, with groups. Then, if we were going out,
yeah,
shopping or whatever, eating in a restaurant, it was
yeah,
always in a group.
yeah,
Yeah, and it became less of a external problem, when I was a priest and I'd go out, it was
yeah,
always with going out with this or that couple, going out with this or that family, going out with this,
yeah,
council, the finance council, we were going
yeah,
out, to eat or something. Uh, but still the internal
yeah,
burden of loneliness was always there, even
yeah,
though externally it looked pretty normal, I would say. Um, and that's where I think what you said about I got to a point where it just became so heavy that I
yeah,
couldn't pretend anymore. I couldn't make do, the laughing, the smiling, the overworking that I had, as a
yeah,
pastor.
yeah,
It was like doing everything. And I think for me, the ADHD helped, that I would go from, there was one point, where, well, a lot of Catholic parishes in the United States have schools attached to them.
yeah,
Um, and so I'd visit, the little kids in the school or the junior high kids, and I'd be, teaching like a group of 4-year-olds how to make the sign of the cross. And
yeah,
then I'd rush to the hospital because somebody was, had gotten in an accident or they had a heart attack. And then I'd go back and teach my high school classes,
yeah,
so I think my personality really locked into that because that was
yeah,
sort of like, oh, this is great. I go from one thing to another and I don't have to slow down. But
yeah,
it was where at a point where it's like physically and emotionally, I had to slow down.
yeah,
And that's when my crash came in 2006. It was like, you can't do this anymore.
yeah,
And then when it was publicly told to me that I can't do this anymore for other reasons, uh, then that was the end of that very long part of my life
yeah,
that I was pretending. And that's when the bishop called me in and said, somebody had said you're gay. And
yeah,
I said, yeah, I am. And it was
yeah,
this great release that I actually said that to somebody in authority.
yeah,
But as I told my therapist, when I was in after that, after I told him, when I was with my therapist, I said, my fear has always been people will find out about me
yeah,
and reject me. And then I told her, I said, and now I'm being rejected by the church
yeah,
because of this.
yeah,
Um, that was one of those moments where it was, for me, I can speak for myself. I hate to be right in
yeah,
those kinds of moments. And it's like, damn
yeah,
it,
I know what you
I
mean.
was right. I told
Yeah,
you so, you know.
yeah,
But again, like I said last time, that's my inner jackass trying to keep me down,
yeah,
saying, oh, yeah, I told you so. See, you shouldn't have told them. You should have
yeah,
lied. If
yeah,
you would have lied, none of this
yeah,
would have happened. And it's like, God. So I'm,
yeah,
I suppress the inner jackass as much as I can. So,
yeah. I think we all go through those moments though. And I think what I've realized for me is in all that sort of not necessarily character playing, but in only showcasing aspects of myself in Madrid, especially, and maybe shutting people out in other areas and wanting to do them on my own, from because there's a lot of hobbies that I really enjoy doing that I've realized now if I had built friendships around them, and they do have a lot of these meetup groups and um, things. I'm not sure in Madrid, but definitely in Barcelona, they've had a lot of them. And I'm like, now, well, yeah, I've realized all along, the authentic version of myself was the one that people resonated the most with. And that's why sort of this over the top, jovial, drunken mess, tequila shots, and put it on a show and blasting the music and rallying like the troops to go to every party and picnic and everything when I was in Madrid. That was not really me. That was me trying actually not to be on my own, but actually the authentic version of me, which is a bit socially awkward and loves things like hiking and just makes some weird jokes and things sometimes. It's like that's actually when I look back to my core friends that I've known since before I ever moved in there and people that I'm close with now, the version that people appreciate the most. But there's always, I think, when you've got bottled up emotions and when you've been through some sort of trauma or having to hold parts of yourself, whether it's through teen years or whatever, that um, it's one of those things that it's you've got to navigate through it and you've got to go through some hard times to really appreciate yourself and recognize the people that are in your life and who to keep in, who to keep out, and who's actually people that you're maybe discounting that could have a lot of value to your life. So that's one thing that I've worked on a lot, especially this year. And like I said, it's something I'm still working on, but it's so important, I think, just to be authentically yourself, and who likes it, and who doesn't, well, okay,
Right,
fair enough.
right, right.
But yeah, and I think something else that happens as well is through social media. Like, I think LinkedIn is great now for connecting with people. Like, there's been so much progress there. And
Right.
I don't really use the apps or anything anymore. I mean, there's no point while I'm in England, it's a ghost
Yeah.
town. But I definitely with those meetup groups, I think nowadays I am more the type that will go to these networking events. And maybe if I meet one or two people I connect with that way, then that's great. But if not, I don't feel like I need to be forcing myself out or with a group. I want to build those one-to-one connections. And I've realized you're, like I said before, you only need a few solid friends in life. And if there's some great acquaintances around that that fit different parts, then that's fantastic. But
Right.
nothing needs to be forced. The right people will come into your life at the right time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, I'm not sure in terms of your experience how it's been sort of like finding, especially, after the church and kind of that sort of rejection feeling from that, sort of finding trust within friendships and people again. Because I know you've had sort of that feeling of betrayal and people you
Yeah.
trusted in the past. How has it sort of
It's been
impacted in your
it's
friendships like nowadays?
it's funny you said that because I was thinking of this beforehand and I was going to say it and I totally forgot. So thank you for reminding me. But on that note, I had written a letter to the bishop who is now deceased.
Yeah,
But I wrote to him about a year after I was here in Chicago because I had
yeah,
gotten no communication
yeah,
from anyone aside from two, is ironic, two very, very conservative priests
yeah,
kept contact with me throughout all this, knowing my whole story.
yeah,
And they kept, and then there's a third guy who was really tight also, who has kept, even to this day, has kept in contact. So it's been great. But um, the thing I wrote in the letter was that I have heard nothing from any of the official shepherds of the church. And
yeah,
then I drew the parallel with, Jesus didn't wait for the sheep to call out to him. He
yeah,
went searching for the lost sheep.
yeah,
Uh, and then I said, I have gotten more Christian charity from and I use the word very, very lovingly, from my pagan friends
yeah,
than I have from the official shepherds of the church, and with those exceptions, of course. But yeah, and I think that's one of the things that has helped me keep the trust up
Yeah.
is that it goes beyond somebody's creed,
Yeah.
which I think is very important. That we always think of, the Christian virtues, and it's like, well, they're not unique to a religion. They're
Yeah.
human virtues, and either you got it or you don't.
Yeah.
And lots of people on all walks of life and all beliefs or unbeliefs, lots of people have them.
Yeah.
And it really spans the human race, not a denominational thing. And
Yeah.
I think that's what living in, this whole, especially the Western world, influenced by Christianity for so long, and now we're living in, I think, what fairly is called the post-Christian world,
Yeah.
is that a lot of these things aren't taken for granted. I mean, um, they have been taken for granted and assumed to be part of the world. And it's like, well,
Mm.
not when a large part of that world doesn't take
Yeah.
that denominational interpretation or this creed.
Yeah.
But you still got virtues. They're still there.
Yeah.
You
It's
know,
true.
as
It's
they were there in the pre-Christian world. You know, the Romans weren't just total monsters and
yeah. Yeah.
and orgiastic beasts.
Yeah.
They were
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
yeah. So it's that's helped with my trust. To get back to your original question, that's helped a lot. Being able to develop these acquaintances and friendships beyond my former profession.
Yeah.
It's helped. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's so important as well because it's it can be really, and I think for people out there that are going through a lonely time, like finding, a sort of peace within yourself and also things that you really enjoy doing on your own, because a lot of people can get caught up in the feeling of just feeling alone, and it can very quickly go into depression and spiral. And I always say that you've got to keep finding something that engages you and that you're interested in and working on it, whatever hobby it is. And then, naturally you have then possibility of meeting someone through it and building those connections. But, in a social media world, I do think the last few years with social media, it is getting better. But maybe that's because I was never on LinkedIn until a year and a half ago. I found that the people that I meet through LinkedIn have been so, maybe I'm just at a different point in my life, but just so much like where I am at now and easier to connect with than say 3 4 years ago, because 3 4 years ago I was very much in the weeds of my life is a disaster, uploading
Right.
like,
Right.
and you just
Yeah.
go through that anxiety and
Yeah.
also that feeling as well of, oh crap, am I ever going to meet, it sounds so cliched, the one. And
Mhm.
ironically now at 33, I don't have the same anxiety I did at say 28,
Yeah.
of being on my own. I used to have this nonstop fear, like, am I ever going to meet this partner? Am I going to be on my own forever? And I remember my ex as well saying, you'll never meet anyone better than me at the end of the relationship. Well, ironically, I've not met anyone since, but I'm actually a
But
lot
that's not the
happier
reason. Yeah.
now. Yeah, it's like ironic last words from him, but it's
Wow.
ironically,
That sounds like dating Donald Trump.
yeah, it was such a toxic end to the
I'm the
relationship.
best one you'll ever meet.
Yeah, and ironically nowadays, like I find a lot more comfortability with being on my own because I see so many people in these toxic relationships or just in a relationship not to be on their own or relationship jump. I've had so many friends that go from one to another. And I'm like, you know what, if I meet someone, then I do, but I don't know where I'm going to be living 6 months from now. I'm like hopping from Barcelona back to England, then probably to Madrid. So I was never in the mode of wanting to date in Barcelona because I knew I was not going to stay there. And so all these things that I used to worry about are not so important. It's like if I can focus on three or four friendships that are really solid, then that's more important than being in this, fast track Tinder swiping,
Right. Yeah.
stress, dating, dressing up, and well, like when I think back to the stresses I used to get myself into in terms of like going on dates, the thought of it felt like a job interview and
Yeah.
picking
Yeah.
out
Yeah.
the outfit. I'm like, oh, I can't be bothered with that. If I meet someone, I want to be friends with them, really get to know them first. And if something happens, it happens.
Right.
But um, yeah, it's like I still have lonely days and lonely moments, but they're not crippling like they used to be 3 or 4
Right.
years.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. That's what I feel is that they're there and I'm still living my life. I am not just
Yeah.
paralyzed. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the most, and keeping busy, finding hobbies we're
Yep.
interested in. It's like, for you, with you've got the busy few weeks coming up with the play and everything, and those things, once we're occupied and busy, it really keeps us in the mode where when your mind's completely still and you've got really nothing planned, that's when you can go into that sort of dark headspace. But I think you
Right.
fill in your life and hobbies with things that you really enjoy, then having supportive friends as well. But even if you're on your own, you can feel like, okay, yeah, I'm good.
Yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
And so yeah, and as well, before we wrap up today, so I wanted you again to tell everyone about this upcoming play and
Oh, thank
everything
you.
that's coming in
Yeah.
the next few weeks, so everyone can hear about it, and
Yeah,
I
I'll
can
be
put in the
putting it
links.
up on LinkedIn regularly. I'm meeting on Friday with a videographer
Yeah,
and a sign language interpreter and a person who's doing the audio description for the blind. So
yeah,
we're
all
hoping that
exciting.
the Sunday matinee, the last of it, will be able to be live streamed or at least put up somewhere.
Yeah,
Uh, so yeah, I'll keep everybody posted. But it's from the October 17th through the 20th here in
yeah,
Chicago at the Athenaeum Theater, their black box stage.
yeah.
I
Oh,
keep telling people not the main stage this time, but
yeah,
yeah, it's a political satire set in 16th century Rome
yeah,
during the election of a pope, and it's called Accidental Election of an Anarchist.
yeah,
It's an homage to the Italian playwrights Dario Fo and Franca Rame, who wrote Accidental Death of an Anarchist. So
yeah.
mine is Accidental Election of an Anarchist. But yeah, so I'm very excited. The cast and crew are working very well. Uh, I have not been allowed to be at a rehearsal yet, which is difficult for me, but it's I trust them totally. So
Yeah,
I'm looking forward. They say they want me to be totally surprised and pleased. So I trust them with that. So
yeah. I'm
and
sure
we
it's
had a
going to
great
be
marketing
awesome.
team. Oh my gosh, it's amazing.
Yeah, I'm sure you're counting down the days now. It's only 5 weeks
Yes.
to go. But yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's super exciting. And you're
Yeah.
definitely, well, yeah, I'll definitely have to post like the links for your socials and so
Oh,
people
thank
can
you.
keep
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
in touch for that. Because yeah, I've had a few people actually from, I don't know what it is, the Chicago, I can't even say it, Chicago. A lot of people like lately actually from there on the podcast and recording. So
Oh, great.
so
Okay.
I think, yeah, definitely all the links I can get, I shall post with the podcast. And
Oh, that
yeah,
would be
it's an
great. Yeah.
exciting
Thank
time
you.
for you, the final
Yeah. Yeah.
countdown
Yeah.
these weeks. But,
Yeah.
but yeah,
So
thanks so much for coming on today and joining me.
thank
And
you.
yeah, always great to have you on the pod. And yeah, I'm going to feed these lazy cats now because they
Yes.
are super
So I
hungry and
just
waiting.
thought of a better image for you.
Yeah,
Rather than being the turnip in the fruit basket, you
yeah,
are one of the great jewels on the crown.
yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm gonna, well, these cats are always ready for food, having three of
yeah.
them. And, but at least they're sunbathing, so they've had
Yeah, great. Well, edit
Absolutely.
what you need out, especially that big techno gap. So,
Yeah. But yeah, it was so great having you on the pod again. And so have a great rest of your
yeah.
day. And so thank you everyone for tuning in to another episode of the Queerness Diaries. And we'll be back next week. So thank you so much.
Thank you.